I have this brief tutorial which will be kind of a few thoughts on how to set yourself up to do a Bargue drawing. And this is just more like tips. There's many ways that you could set up to do drawing copies, and we'll go over that when we're discussing it at Thothstudio. And there are many tutorials available online for sure that you can find. But one thing I wanted to point out that isn't always pointed out, some do, and some don't. And this is really to set yourself up for success in any kind of a drawing, any drawing where you're doing a copy of some sort of reference. And in the case of the Bargue drawings, you'll be working from some sort of a piece of paper. You'll have a photo or an image that looks a little bit like that. Let's say these are the eye plate of the Bargues, and this is reproduced about 200%, which I think would probably be a not bad size to work from, and you'll see in a moment why. So that's one thing. The other thing is the way this is set up. You see that it's at an angle, and in other words, it isn't flat. There is one thing that happens a lot when people are doing copies of things, is that they are not seeing the reference, nor maybe are they even looking at their own work at a right angle, perpendicular to their eyesight. In other words, just for example, if you had a sketchbook and you were on a streetcar or subway or on a park bench or at home, you typically, without thinking really, just as you would a book, you would have the piece of paper at about perfect right angles to your line of vision. You wouldn't typically draw like this with a weird angle like that or sideways. That would give you a skewed look of what it is you're looking at, or skew your image. So you almost automatically have it at 90 degrees, and that's why you should be working, whether you're seated or standing as I am, to have some way to have your work angled so that you're not seeing it at a strange, skewed angle. It happens all the time, though, when people are doing it. It's just like in an easel. If you are looking at a work, it could be a drawing set up, or it could be a painting, and you're looking at it at your eye level, it should be perfectly vertical, just so that you're perfectly perpendicular. If you have it a little bit below your eye level, of course, you can angle the easel back again, so that when you're looking at it, you see when your head inclines, you've got another 90-degree angle. So here with the Bargue drawing set up, I've got a board angled somewhat, I think pretty close to perpendicular. It's very close. And it's not too important when your model is only a small thing like this. It won't be that big of a difference if it's off by a degree or two. So I'm right-handed, so I've got my model, my reference on my left, and I've got my piece of paper on my right. So there's two things I want to show you here. Is one, I want to show a little bit about drawing the lines, because remember, in the Bargues, part of the reason you want to make the copies is to emulate that style of line, which is kind of what you would call a slightly hazy or ghostly, bandy being slightly curved but more or less rectilinear to curvilinear, like this one. And they aren't a thin line like these crosshair lines. Those are very thin, and these are all wider, and that's important. You want to do both, but when your own lines, you make them like that. It's something you practice, because you practice it not only to be able to emulate it, but it actually is a very good way to do block-in and drawing lines. Here I have a piece of scratch paper underneath my working paper. And I do this kind of practice all the time as a warm-up, or just to try to get better at it. Going over the, going over the same line over and over again with the point, not the side. If you do it too low, you see how I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but the point of the pencil is beyond the mark I'm making. Whereas if I hold it at a slight angle, the angle of the paper is not perfectly flat to the pencil, or the pencil isn't flat to the paper, it's up a little bit, then I'm using the very tip. And I can go over and over the same spot and just get that correct kind of line. And it's good to practice this for shorter ones, longer ones. You use more of the wrist, more of the elbow. The other thing to remember is you keep your hand on the paper and your fingers aren't moving, but your wrist is moving. So the guide is really the pinky side of your hand. You have this on like a slide. Now, if you're making much larger lines, at some point you may have to take your hand off and use your entire arm. But the more you can rest your arm on something, your hand on something, the more relaxed you can be, and you'll keep a line very consistent. You can also the other thing is there's different opinions about this, but I'm using a B pencil here. This is a Palomino pencil, Japanese pencil. The reason I'm using a B is so that I can make light lines by applying the graphite very, very lightly. So I know these can get dark, but to make them light, I want to apply with a very light hand. And also, I find that they're easier to erase than a hard pencil can be. And certainly, if you push or press harder with your drawing point, you can go overly dark, and that too is hard to erase. And because of the length of these points, you can break them. So this it makes you use a very light touch. The key, though, is a key. Give yourself a chance to begin with is to do a horizontal line. Oops, that's terrible. Horizontal line, which will be used as a guide when you check against this one. Now, the other thing is you want to have a vertical as well, and you got to make sure that your vertical is actually at right angles, and you can do that strictly by measuring against the side of your paper, let's say. The other way to do it is to line it up with the original horizontally, and then just pick a point here and another one there, and then go straight down, and then you've got a right angle that you can use now to start to draw. And this is where you begin trying to find any point that crosses the line. Would be the easiest to start with. You can begin arbitrarily. We'll go through that in the actual instruction. But final point, the lines that you're making now, remember, they're going to be like this. And I want to go to some point. I'm going to say this point here. If you can, I'm trying to cross the vertical at a point that I estimate from here to there. So I'm estimating this by eye. I'm not measuring anything. I'm measuring by eye. And I'm estimating that's about an inch, and I'm going to say it's about there. So now I'm going to estimate the angle. I know it isn't perfectly horizontal, or in other words, it's not parallel to this. This side is a little higher than that side. So I'm going to try to just do that at the approximate length that I see. Now I'm not going to know if I'm right for a little while. I have to put a few more lines down. Like, let's say I'm going to start this one, and I want it to go from here, which I'm estimating, that's a bit too close. Let's say it's from this distance. So I look and I look and I look, and I try to look here and I look there, and I think it's about there. And then I want it to go down to here. So I can look on the horizontal and look back and forth and then estimate back and forth here. That's a bit too far. That might be a bit high. I think I angled this too high. As soon as I look now, I look at the space under there, like as if it's a graph, and I look at this space and I can see this one is wider compared to its height. So either I have to move that out farther to the left or move this down. And it could be a bit of both. So really, this is how I would start any given drawing, to try to do these bargues just using eyeballing. I'm going to guess it was this. Looks a bit better. And that's about it. Carry on from there. Lots more to do. Anyway, that's about it. That's all I wanted to present today. I hope you found that useful. And thanks very much for watching. If you have any comments or questions about today's video, please leave them in the comments below or in the section below. And also, if you have maybe questions about something you'd like to see in the future, or for me to elaborate more on this topic as well, please do so in the comment section too. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.